Hi, English 9, and welcome back to our reading of The Glory Field by Walter Dean Myers. Today we are beginning the section titled April 1900, Curry Island, South Carolina. Our reading begins on page 73. You will notice on page 72 that there is an updated family tree of the Lewis family. Please make sure you have your book open and that you are following along. Suki, if you think you've fooling somebody by walking slow, I just want to tell you that you ain't, Elijah Lewis called to the mule, knowing that he would be ignored. He stopped, pushed his hat back off his forehead, and wiped the sweat from his brow. He had been in the field all morning, and the road seemed to get longer and the field wider. He looked over to the old field, knowing that he would see Grandma Saren's dark form somewhere in the square patch of rich earth. When the war between the states had ended and the Yankees had helped parcel out the land to blacks who wanted to stay and farm, the only land that most of them knew, the Lewis family had been given the 8 acres that bordered live oaks. The story went that Moses had led them into the field to pray, that he was so filled with joy of being able to look upon the people gathered around him, finally not having to share them with an overseer or master, that he couldn't speak. After a long while, he lifted his face to the heavens and called out, "Glory!" Afterwards, when they did pray together in the glory field, they pledged forever to sing and give praise to the Lord and to freedom. Suki had pulled the plow over and had stopped when she felt the lack of resistance. Elijah picked up the reins, angled the plow back into the dark earth, and clicked his tongue at the old mule. Suki started again, turning over the new ground. Life had been good, if strange, after the war. The white people around Curry had to learn that the blacks were free, and the blacks had to learn just what being free meant. To some, it meant being hungry for the first time and trying to take care of themselves for the first time. To others, it meant working the land as they always had, but working it for themselves. Most of the people from Live Oaks had taken the name Lewis, so those who had been sold away could find them if they made their way back. Some had taken other names, wanting to establish their own family. There were Eppses and Foxes, and even a few Oakses, but the names weren't a problem. After the Yankee soldiers left, it was the whites who were trying to get things back to what they had been before the war. Blacks who had a little land were losing it to the banks and to taxes. And then there was the Klan, white men who rode at night terrorizing blacks, pulling them out of their homes and beating them for being disrespectful to a white man, or for not working hard enough in a field they were sharecropping. That's why the Lewis family worked so hard to hang on to the land they owned. They didn't want to sharecrop. That's not just dirt out there, Grandma Saren had said. Somebody in our family been working that land since we was first brought over here. We've been up and down these fields till we know them like we know our own hands. Back in slavery times, it was us who sweated over those fields, bled over them, and Lord knows cried over them. It was good thinking, as far as Elijah could tell. But on Curry, good thinking didn't go too far if you were black. Things were going hard, and they were back on their taxes. Grandpa Moses Lewis and Saren had gone to the bank in Johnson City to see if they could borrow the money. This little pinch-faced man said they didn't lend no money to colored. Grandpa Moses sucked on his pipe when they got back. Said the King Street Bank was for white folks. It was something in the way the two old people had looked away from each other, not wanting to see the hurt they both shared, that sent a chill through Elijah, a chill that turned to anger when he thought about it. Suki, Elijah called out, what do you think? You think we're ever going to keep this land? Suki paced forward slowly, placing her front feet carefully before her, jerking slightly with her hips as she moved down the row. Suki, you the dumbest mule I've ever seen, Elijah called out. I'm talking good sense to you about our future, and you just ignore me. You think you white or something? Suki reached the end of the row and turned left to come up the next row. Least you could tell me what you think of Abby's idea of being fishermen, Elijah said. Beats sharecropping, I think. Don't know if it beats working in a pulp mill. Elijah's father, Richard, had worked in 2 pulp mills in Georgia. The first had been near Savannah and the other was in Valdosta. When he had come home this time, Elijah thought he looked different, older. There were small lines in his forehead and the front edges of his hair over his ears had grayed. He didn't talk much about his work or about his and Lizzie's being away from the family, and Elijah didn't bring it up. He didn't bring up the boat either. It was Abby who had found the boat they had. Abby was 14, 6 months younger than Elijah, and a lot more carefree. Abby had seen the boat when he went searching for she crabs down by the river. It didn't look like much, and the old man who owned it was glad to exchange 2 loads of firewood for it. They had loaded the boat up on a wagon and brought it home. Grandpa Moses worked on it with them, replacing some of the wood that had rotted away and pitching it with tar and crushed oyster shells until it was watertight. When it was ready, they went out in it as much as they could. Sometimes they went out in it on Sundays after church. And if Grandma Saren was off visiting her sister in Johnson City, even caught a few fish to sell before the old woman came home and found them working on the Sabbath. Elijah looked up at the sky, shielding his eyes from the bright sun. There would be another 2 hours of daylight beating down on him, 2 more hours of trailing behind Suki before he would call it a day. He remembered that it was Saturday, and they would all have the next day off. They were going to bless the new cemetery in the back of the church after services, and then have a picnic. Then he would have to sit with Abby and hear him talk about how they should give up farming and concentrate on fishing, or maybe even go live in Johnson City and be city folk. But Abby wouldn't say anything in front of the old folks, and he would do his share of plowing the same way all the others in the Lewis family did. Hey, Suki, Elijah called. What do you think about moving to Johnson City? You a city mule? Suki stopped at the end of the row and turned left.